Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 69th edition of the Frank and Stan chat. And as you can see, it's just Frank and Stan this week. We have no guest, but I know that Stan is completely worn out and he's given his all for the next generation. So good afternoon, Stan.
Good afternoon. Just to explain that, I've just last hour got back from a group visit to Windermere at an outdoor ed centre with the school where I'm a governor, who were down on staff because of COVID and asked would I, at short notice, go and spend 3 days and 2 nights with their students, their pupils. But yeah, so I'm absolutely exhausted, but it's been fantastic.
Fantastic, yeah.
And if you're on Windermere, there's no better weather than we've had in the last few days.
Great. So what year group was that? Year 6?
Year 6, 60 children for 2 nights, 3 days, and doing things that I haven't done probably in 30 years.
So, I mean, in a way, I always look back on this because it's funny. I was talking to somebody only about 15 minutes ago who lives in the Isle of Man, and I was saying, well, it must be about 25, 30 years ago since I was in the Isle of Man, and that was with a year 6 and a year 6 residential, and actually sort of you look back on it with sort of fairly rose-coloured, glasses sort of thing, but actually thinking back about what the sorts of things you did, and also the challenges that the children faced, it gets to your soul, doesn't it, in some of those activities?
Amazing. Just to see. I mean, we will get on to what's caught your eye, and this has clearly caught my eye this week. But it's a reminder. I do say a lot about, it's not just a curriculum. It's about how the curriculum's put together in order to have a range of experience. And I think a residential in the outdoors is something that should be compulsory for all schools to provide.
Yeah.
Because of just how the children have responded this last 3 days. I've just had a text from the head saying, I hope you're not too tired and thank you very much.
Well, yeah, and in a way it's funny, isn't it, that little text means a lot, doesn't it, when you think what you've given up, but actually you've gained as much as the children have, I think. But it's nice for it to be recognized in that way.
It is. And I think that's important, because especially, obviously, I made my own way there. I didn't go in the coach with the children, so I kind of almost sneaked away at the end of today, well, lunchtime today, and they were coming back in the coach later. So
brilliant.
It wasn't a great, right, I'm off, everybody.
So is that what's caught your eye this week then, Stan? What's
actually caught my eye is a couple of children who have, I think they've grown in 3 days. The fact that one, on whatever day it was, I'd never met the children before that were in my group. So there was one child who was too shy to tell me her name. And when I'm saying, come on, shout it out, we eventually got it as a whisper. And there was another child who is one of those who just drops and loses everything. The first day he lost his £50 Manchester United jacket. It's just one of those. And to see how they, over the 2 days, we went gill scrambling, and the young girl didn't want to get her feet wet. We were in wetsuits. We were in wetsuit, fleece, over jacket, a plastic over jacket, which gets you hot anyway, and a buoyancy aid and a helmet.
Wow.
in the heat that's been this week. So it was, but she decided, and while I watched the group, she picked her way through the gill without actually getting her feet in the water for almost halfway.
Right.
And she did it quietly. Nobody noticed. She was just doing her own thing. And then there was a part where you had to get your legs in the water to get through. And then she just kind of grew from that. And at the end, she was jumping in from rocks and things. And really saying, well, as we've left today, and I've said, you know, I've seen a big difference in you. There's this confidence that just wasn't there at the beginning.
Yeah.
And the young lad who I understand has got issues at home, not with him, with the family that he lives with. He was just chaotic. Everything, it was had all his kit in a bundle with things falling out. And today, when we've debriefed at the end of it, he's really got an understanding of what he's learned is a bit of organisation and a bit of independence, and how, as he said, independence is really hard. And
Yes.
I just those things, when you've worked with them for only 2.5 days and you've seen that difference, I just think schools should be making sure that all children get that opportunity, because it's often the ones you don't think
Yeah,
have got
definitely.
that in them who come to the fore in those situations.
Yeah, one of the things though, when you get to, I mean, I'm in my mid-60s, and you reflect back on what you did as a head, you know, when I was in my 40s, and the school in South Manchester I was head of, I remember parents questioning whether or not children were too young in year 4 to actually go on what was a 2-night stay at a Cheshire residential centre at Tattenhall. And I, you know, I mean, in a way, very articulate parents, you know, able to assemble an argument, this sort of thing. But actually, you know, you have to do it because you know it's the right thing. But actually, the children themselves, when they come back, win the argument. But I would say that was part of a year 5 went on a sort of went to the Peak District, a youth hostel trip, which was actually very demanding because it involved a 10-mile hike to get to the centre. So we would be dropped off, we'd walk along the valley floor, we'd have a series of maths challenges on the valley floor, and also, you know, and then the bags were taken to the youth hostel. So when we arrived, they were all there and they're all sort of ready. But then in the year 6, it was then back to youth hostel in North Yorkshire. I remember the first time we went there was the first time that we'd gone, and my daughter, who's got type 1 diabetes, was my wife found out when she took her to the doctors, and I was in North Yorkshire on this residential. So she's with me today. So it's quite sort of poignant, really, that, or it reminds me of less happy times. But the what this brings to an individual is immense.
What it brought to me, Frank, was I did those kind of things when I was ahead in my 40s. I probably haven't done things like doing scrambling since then. And there was one point where the tutor who was leading it looked to me like the referees do in a boxing match, where they're going to ask the fighter, are they okay to carry on?
So did the other staff have a white towel that they could throw into the ring, you know?
The best thing was he was very subtle about what he did, and he said, look, you know, we need to catch some photographs. So if for a while there's some really good photo opportunities coming up where there's plunge pools, if you go on the path at the side and get up there in front of us, you'll be able to catch them with the sun in the right place. I know what you're saying. You're slowing the group down.
Well, what's caught my eye this week? Well, while you've been away, Stan, it's as if the whole, well, what appeared to be the whole educational world, political world, has turned upside down. But that isn't. But that obviously has caught my eye. And I think that what caught my eye, a number of things which are not related to that. But I'm going to pump for a tweet that came out this morning from the Educational Endowment Foundation, which actually highlights the sort of research that's available for schools, and did it in a way which meant that there was a summary of the available evidence, for example, around metacognition, around mentoring, around summer schools, this sort of stuff. Very similar to the way John Hattie did it, but without all the speedometers and things that he gave. But it actually sort of summarized some very interesting things, one of which was, and it leads into Nick Gibb now, into phonics, which actually is summarized as low cost, high impact, and extensive research to support it. But there were other areas which I've heard people talk about, which had low impact, high expense, light on evidence, and actually made me think that whether or not there needs to be a sort of like, there's an office of budgetary responsibility that the government has, which actually sort of acts as a sort of like an arbiter, or a sort of like not a judge, but somebody that actually means that you're going to be challenged if in terms of these predictions and whatever financial predictions. But it did make me think whether or not there was a need for a sort of an educational research body that would be seen to be playing fair in terms of not looking at the available research. And actually the Educational Endowment Foundation might not be that right body, but they've actually got something in terms of a place in the if we call it a market, but in education, that means that they could play fair judge and jury, really.
My issue with that though, Frank, is always the things that are easier to research then become the things that we can find an answer to this. This gives us a figure. This makes it that schools are making a difference with this, so we should all do that.
Yes.
Rather than, well, that's outdoor ed, 2.5 days in outdoor ed. What difference does that make to a child's confidence?
Well, let's face it, that will probably be high, low impact. If you, in the great scheme of things, high cost. Yeah. And there's probably, I don't know what the level of research is into it. But I think the point that I was struck by was this idea that we need to get, we are increasingly, I mean, going back to that ITTE review, we're increasingly, educators are increasingly challenged, to by itself, by politicians, by parents, whatever, to do things in a certain way, preferred, a preferred approach. But actually,
ideology, if you push it even further.
Yeah, but it's funny because somebody came back to me actually on one of these calls, a professor, and said, Frank, don't forget, we've all got ideology. Don't use ideology as a swear word or something, towards, that our ideology sits somewhere else to the governments in many cases, many places at the moment, but we should not. So it's interesting.
I read a tweet that said of Nick Gibb, really passionate about the things that he believed would make a difference. Unfortunately, not passionate enough to see there were other ththings that would make a difference as well.
Yes,
it had to be down the line. One thing.
And actually, I think though that we, in a way, if we were able to, I mean, I think an academic or a degree-based qualification in order to be a teacher gives you the ability to, I hope, to analyze evidence and to look at educational research and to consider whether or not it's sufficiently robust for this to be worthy of further consideration. And actually, I think that's what I think the more of a less of a an instructional type of training program, that won't give you that. That actually, we are talking today about Nick Gibb, no longer being in government or being a government minister for education, but actually, he had a set idea of some things that he valued heavily. And it would be very easy if we were to get into a situation where, those sorts of things were not challenged by the profession because we didn't have sufficient numbers who were actually able to, to do it in that way,
my issue with these are always, as long as it doesn't prevent schools from experimenting and for doing things that work for their children in the context of their school. Because research based around a single school is never going to be academically acceptable as proof. But there are things that you go into an individual school and they say, we do this and it really works for us. And often I find it's when the whole staff are committed to it.
Yes.
I mean, we've talked about it before. You and I saw when we were inspecting things that work really well and tried to reproduce them in our own school.
No, and they don't work. I mean, I think also it's there's something around, it's a bit like football, isn't it, or sport. you know, if you're a manager of a team, you know, you look at the team or the players available to you, and you think, well, actually, we're probably going to get a better outcome if we do it this way, you know,
Mm.
and you know, we've seen situations where heads have moved to new schools and have tried to
Yeah.
replicate, and it's gone absolutely
Yeah.
colossally wrong.
I think that's often because they forget the process that they went through to get to their outcome, and they start by the outcome,
Yes,
saying what we're
yes,
going to do, and they forget that the process is. Do you remember walkthrough when that first
yeah,
came out? Anthony Alvarado, I think it was, who had a great success with a group of heads in New York of getting them to analyze themselves, and it was sort of world beating stuff that these heads now videoed themselves, unpicked it, redid it, rethought it, and did walkthrough in their schools, and it was a great success. He then moved to the other side of the States with that finished product, and it absolutely bombed. And I think he got
yes.
sacked actually, because it just they'd not gone through the process. So he
Well,
hadn't dragged those heads through those starting points of what you do first, and how did we get there? Did we all believe in it?
yeah, well, it's the same thing, isn't it, with the London Challenge? I was very suspicious of those outcomes, and but whatever that was, you know, there was a sense of a period of gestation, really, where some of these ideas and thoughts were actually, you know, developed with a group of people from across London. But then the thought that you can simply, do you know what? We've got a problem in Manchester, or we've got a problem in Newcastle. Why don't we just do, you know, we know, let's forget the gestation.
Yeah,
Let's just deliver what, you know, forget all that, because we know this works now. And they ignore the fact that that bit of gestation is crucially important for the success of the project, you know, so that it can actually flex to meet the needs of those participants in that area.
yeah, and I mean, we say it loads of time. Context is everything.
Yeah,
I think in schools, and we have still got this model somewhere of this silver bullet that once one school's managed to crack something, it's just a matter of replicating it across the country.
yeah.
And
One, can we, I mean, while you've been away, Stan, we've got Gavin Williamson has gone, and the two big names, Williamson and Gibb, are no longer
yeah,
ministers. So, um, and of course, with that comes certainly a period of hope. I wouldn't say optimism, but hope. But actually, and it's interesting that the new Secretary of State has apparently written to all schools, you know, sort of, you know, trying to get a sense that we're going to do this all together, sort of thing. You know, I really, I welcome that intention, but actually, I think I'd find it easier if this minister hadn't already been in education department, you know, before. And you know, and here we are, you know, was it 11 years of a conservative government? You know, that actually that for me, that it's going to take some real hard work and some pretty dynamic, positive stuff for me to start thinking, do you know what? I think this one actually means it, you know? So, I mean, in a way, Nick Gibbs' loss, I mean, somebody was saying that, well, he's been there so long that children have virtually gone through the whole school and now at university or something, you know, so
yeah,
it's going to feel really weird because some of those pillars that this education has been based on, you know, the phonics and all that sort of stuff, I suspect they'll all stay, but you know, they're
yeah.
open, I suppose, open to challenge now.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't think they'll go, but maybe we'll have a view that that's not everything in the
No,
armory, and in some schools for some children there are different ways that they will get through the learning and everything that they need to do in order to be able to be readers and articulate.
yeah,
We need to do it in a way that gives everybody a chance to try what works best for them, not impose
no,
this on
no,
everyone. And we
no.
know that, and schools know that. Everybody in education knows that, but still we get bullied into following that kind
I,
of
I know that we did. I mean, we didn't do systematic synthetic phonics, because at the time when I was a head, I left there in 2001. I don't know whether or not actually that idea had actually been developed, but I do know we did phonics, and the reading outcomes at the school where I was the head were pretty amazing. Now, I mean, we were in a very fortunate area. Parents were very supportive. I had some good staff, but it always irks me to think that, yeah, there were schools, weren't there, where reading was not anywhere near as good, and probably still not as good. But actually this has been seen as a silver bullet.
Yeah, I would say I have never been against phonics from my early teaching career. People who were, I suppose you describe them as long in the tooth at that point, would say you need to do, phonics, that you need to do this, you need to do that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a part. The thing that I believe in it's a part. It's part of a toolkit. It's not a toolkit.
Yeah. Well, I think that for me, I think we've just got to be hopeful and reach out and hope that some of these alleyways that the government's got themselves into, the only way they're going to get out of those is by actually asking people to help them get out of there and come up with alternative approaches. But I think, I don't know why you've been away also, Stan. There was another car. Well, there's been another car crash interview with Amanda Spillman. Basically, she was interviewed for the Institute for Government, and she suggested that some schools, some schools prioritized the food parcels at the expense of a learning program, for the children. And the response to that, I think, has been, predictable. But actually, what I think I tweeted to say, there was in the interview, I think you and I there were lots of things that she said that actually she had no evidence for. They were just her view. Now, to be honest, Stan, you and I, we do this weekly video cast because we've got loads of views. People might want to listen to them, people might not. But I tell you what, if we were the chief inspector of schools, we would be pretty guarded about what evidence were we drawing on. And I think the point I made was that, during that period, there were no inspectors out in schools.
No.
So on the basis that, what evidence, what first-hand evidence has that chief inspector got of that? And even if there were some inspectors out doing sort of limited work, it's so limited evidence-based that I don't think it's reliable in terms of saying, well, some schools spent. I just think that, I said something like, well, where's this all going to end? Do you prefer Aldi to Lidl? I mean, if you feel as though, well, if you're asked those sorts of questions, you should say, well, I'm sorry, but my inspectors have not investigated that. If we think it's an important point, we will do further investigation. But at the moment, we don't have the evidence to make a judgment on that. Rather than, oh, well, what do you think? Summer schools, extended days. I think, well, we don't know. Nobody's done it.
But perhaps she needs to understand that the amount of time it took to sort out the meals wasn't by school's choice.
No.
It was a ridiculous system that meant hours and hours, and people were up at midnight trying to log on to accounts. So, I mean, obviously, I don't know what she said. I've not seen the interview. But if she's suggesting that it was how much time was spent on that
well, it must be actually, because what she was saying was that there were just too many schools that were hadn't actually sorted the learning programs out for the children, and actually think, well, bloody hell, somebody said this is Maslow's.
I was going to say, I've never heard of Maslow.
I know. And I then said, having my parents, I mean, we struggled during a 13-week strike at Ford's, where there was literally no income coming in, and we were basically, my mother was begging. I think nobody gave a damn. My mother didn't. We were going to school, but nobody really thought about, well, how well are we doing at school? Because actually, the thing is just making sure we could survive an uncertain period of time where there's no money, with no idea where it's coming from. it really feels like, these sorts of comments give you a sense of you don't. I don't think you've ever experienced this. I don't think you've
Yeah.
ever felt that. And at the end of the day, no matter what, I'm not a great lover of Michael Wilshaw, but actually, what he brought was fairly recent head teacher experience. So I think that was critically important in basically understanding what is achievable in schools.
But we must, don't we? Because really, the bottom line in a lot of schools, we use the phrase disadvantage, and that the more I use it, the more I think
Don't
that's
like it.
not really describing what it is.
No.
It's poverty we're talking about. It's poverty in one of the richest nations in the world.
Yeah.
And we have pockets in all areas of real poverty. And if a child of a family are in poverty, actually what the child reads at home is low on the priority list. It is
Yeah.
Maslow. It really is.
It is.
First things first. So I just wish that at some point in the future we would see social care and socialization of communities as the driving point for education. So everybody's fed well, everyone is treated well, and then we have a school system where all children can. I'm in the dream realms.
Well,
I've not had much sleep in 2
well,
days.
but I think some government. Unfortunately, I won't say government, but some politicians think that actually, unless you make it really hard for those that are poor, they will stay poor because they're not motivated because you make it too easy for them. I think that's the sort of thinking behind it. But actually, I think there are, a lot. Universal credit went through on the day of the reshuffle, and a large proportion of people claiming universal credit is because of poor pay, low pay. So these are not skivers. These are not people who, are not aspiring. This is just, the economy seems imbalanced. It's not in sync with itself. And there's a lack of, going back to Amanda Spillman's comments, there's just a lack of empathy, and people are listening to that thinking, I was listening to it thinking, not all the headlines that were around that article were right, don't get me wrong, but actually some of the points you made just made me feel as though I don't think you know what it's like. I just don't think you're close enough to this to know, how schools have reacted, why they're reacting the way they did, and the fact that that is the right thing to do. Really, she would have been best to say those, in those communities where that was needed, that's what those head teachers did, because that's what they had to do.
Yeah.
But because we're so entwined, and the government is so entwined with all these agencies, she can't say that.
No, she
Can't
should
say that.
say.
She should be able to say that, but she can't say it.
Sorting meals out than they did the learning program, which for some schools was the right thing to do. And
and we will, and our inspectors are going to be out there, and we're going to tell the world what a fantastic job you all did.
Yeah.
Because where I live, there was there were children quite close to us who go to a very, very high performing independent school. The school, everybody's got the broadband, everybody had a laptop, they're all doing one-to-one lessons. And Amanda Spillman made clear, 3 times the level of investment in private schools as there in the state schools. So hang on a minute. If anybody thinks that we're ever going to get to a place where state schools are going to be able to match the private schools, unless you do something about the private schools, that ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen in our lifetime. But actually, this idea that, because private schools are able to do that, or because some schools are able to do that, that's great. Some schools could, but not all. The fact that you think every school can do it shows you don't understand. You don't know. You need to get out of that office.
Yeah.
You need to get out and speak to people and see it.
Yeah. It's just funny because unless you've experienced it, and unless you go through those times where you talk to a child and at Christmas and you say, I'll think of a family now that what are you getting for Christmas? Well, me and my older brother and my older sister, who I think was about 15 at the time, we're getting a fort.
Yes.
And that was going to be his Christmas present, was going to be a fort. that all three of them would share. He also had a medallion which had his brother's name on. And when I said, no, that's your brother's. No, no, it's mine. The man just spelt it wrong.
Oh gosh. Oh, dear. But I mean, I see. I think we live in a society where the vast majority of people are, get by. Vast majority can just get by. Some people get more than just get by. But there's sufficient numbers of those for them to feel as though, well, it's the fact that people who can't get by, who need this sort of level of support, there's something, not quite right with them, that, and they don't understand, they don't meet these people
No.
enough to know their circumstances well enough to be able to say that. And
Well, I liked when I think I was working in Lancashire at the time, and we were looking at families, and the sort of spread went from not the worst case scenario, but we had not coping, and thriving.
yeah,
And those were, you could understand that even some families with low income were coping, some with a higher income
yeah,
were not coping.
yeah,
So
yeah.
there was both the amount of money that went into the family and their ability to manage that. And to say it's something, it's not infixable. But there was a piece on, I think it was on a TED talk, about places where they've tried a universal payment, so that everybody in the area, everybody in the country gets paid a minimum amount of money, the same amount of money that covers the basics in life. And from then on, anything, if you want to work, you work to get more money than, so you're never actually in poverty, but you can strive then to get even better. And I mean, according to the TED talk, wherever they've tried it, it's been a success.
Right.
Yet you say to somebody, well, everybody should get a minimum of £250 a week. Oh, we can't afford that.
No, I know.
But what happened was, hospital costs plummeted because people were healthier. Schools did better because children were fed, and all those things that cost a lot of money started to drop in money. So I'm not, I know these are ideal situations, but there is that thought, and countries have tried it, and in places it's worked, in other places it hasn't. But it's something about lifting people out of poverty.
Well, the thing about levelling up in the north and elsewhere, I've said this before. You have to pump much more resources, or projects and stuff into the north. That means that other areas are not going to get them, or you completely wipe the slate clean and you start again. And the only way you do that is through taxation. Taxation is not fair. So I've had a letter. I'm about to be 66, and I've had my letter telling me what my state pension is going to be. From December. It's like additional income. It's not. I don't need that pension. So there's something here wrong with the taxation system, whereby I will be taxed on that, but actually I've worked for it. But actually, I've also worked for other elements, and people have worked less hard, I suspect, than I have, and have gained, massively.
I was listening to a program of people talking about that, about taxing, and people saying, I've paid my taxes all my life, not realizing that when they paid their taxes then, when they were in the 20s and 30s, it was paying for 60 and 70-year-olds then, not being put in a bank somewhere to be able to be used in the future. And once you understand that actually it's an ongoing thing, and we need to generate the money all the time in the current situation to pay for the current pension pot, then it's a different argument altogether about raising taxes. And of course, you would expect that the tax hasn't gone on the super rich, because there's this fantastic argument that whenever you tax the super rich,
well, they all fly off, don't they? And they which I know is the argument used in the 70s, because
it's the same argument. And I always used to say, well, if you sack the boss of somewhere, I'm sure there's a deputy who
Who'd
will
be willing
happily
to.
take that for less money. Boss.
We're not suggesting that for head teachers around the country. Where we listen. Well, one other thing.
Well, it might be in some places, Frank.
Yeah. One
In
other
some
thing.
academies, that might be the case.
Well, one other thing. Last week we spoke about academies and about. I think we got onto with Fiona Miller about CEOs who were trustees and members and whatever. And I started digging around and looked at the latest guidance around what is an acceptable sort of governance structure. And do you know what? The current guidance doesn't say that that can't happen. It says that members, you can't be an employee. That's the only one. So you can't. So the big CEOs who are earning vast sums of money, they can't be a member. But you can be a member and a trustee, and a CEO can be a trustee. And actually, I can see how flawed that argument is. In terms of that, the guidance. It's because there are ministers there are people in the House of Lords who are actually conservative. Actually, that the government doesn't want to upset them. So basically, the wording enables you to actually sort of do that. It doesn't say you can't, as it does with employees and whatever, but you can. And actually, my digging has shown that I'm not saying rampant. Don't get me wrong; it's not rampant, but some very high-profile CEOs are trustees, and there are members who are also trustees. And the whole thing needs to be made much clearer that if you're a CEO, you're not a trustee, you're not a member, and if you're a member, you can't be a trustee. To me, it's as easy as that. And also the other thing was around salaries. If I was going into the new Secretary of State, I would limit the maximum salary of any CEO to 10 times that of the lowest paid full-time member of staff in the trust. And suddenly you'll find that everybody will want to be paying the higher levels of the minimum wage, because that would allow them then to earn more, rather than people being kept at lower levels. So I think that I'll be doing more work on this, because I'm gonna plow through, say, the top 50, the largest 50, and just see what the situation is there. But actually, that all needs to change. And I was right, not 100% right when I spoke to Fiona last week, but I was pretty much right. And how open to it's not abuse. I'm not suggesting there's abuse, conflicts of interest, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, when you've got a situation like that, there will be people who will take advantage of it. Not everybody, and not everybody will even think of taking advantage of it. But where there's a route and somebody says, "Hey, guess what?" and there's nothing that says you can't do it.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the way I used to look at things. If I wanted to get around rules, I wouldn't read the rules. I'd look for things in the rules that said I couldn't. And if it didn't say I couldn't do it, that would be what I'd be looking to do.
Yeah. Well, it needs to say you can't.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, that was 40 minutes, Dan, of our life has gone by.
Coherent, but
no, I've really enjoyed it.
2 hours ago, I was in the middle of Lake Windermere.
Well, I think all of the people that watch Frank and Stan chat would say well done for going, and I don't know anybody who would stand up and say that isn't what a good education should include.
No,
more of
but
that.
I have to say, Frank, I mean, this is one of the centres that 5-6 years ago I managed. The site supervisor and one of the kitchen staff are the only staff that are still there.
Really? Right.
5 years ago. Beautiful place, beautiful building that was only built in 2014.
Yeah, because you did really well to get the funding for that, Stan. I don't know how you managed to get that through the council, but
look at what you can't do, Frank. Put people together who have a similar interest, some with money and some with a desire to do the best by children,
Yes.
and surprise what you can do.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't have that kind of influence anymore, unfortunately, but it was nice to be able to talk to the teachers that I was with about how it had all come about, because it's a stunning building, and to be you talked about youth hosteling. Now these children were in mostly 2-bedded rooms with
Right. With ensuite. So yeah.
a pod, like almost an aircraft type pod, or a
Yes.
cruise type pod. But that's so the children slept well because there were no big dormitories. I
Yeah.
know there's an argument to say, but there's a lot of interaction going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. But no. But that's also reassuring for parents as well, isn't it? And also for children that feel a little bit uneasy about it, knowing that you're going to be in with, say, 10 others is perhaps daunting.
Yeah. So it was great to be able to tell them the story of how we managed to get it. I mean, the actual fact of that is that it was someone's appraisal. I was doing somebody's appraisal, and I said, apart as well as the objectives that we have to set, let's have a dream. Let's put a line in it that said, if you could have anything, what would you have in this? And the answer for that one from that particular head of centre was some more accommodation. So we planned for a 12-bed pod placed, and there's now a 60 place.
Wow, gosh.
But it's about people with the right commitment, people with the ability to generate the money for it, and make the decisions. And we were working with those people. A lot of them were politicians, working with them who said this is happening. And that was great. But as I say, it was sad to see. Not sad because they were really good, but there weren't many permanent staff there. They were peripatetic tutors. That it just felt as though there's not the investment in it.
Right.
In my view.
Well, have they called it the Stan Johnson Centre yet?
No, they won't be calling it that. Having seen me operate on a gill climb, I might have my ashes spread there in the future.
All right. Well, look, thank you, Stan, for your time, and everybody who's watching. Tumultuous week, and I hope we've captured some of the news stories. Probably the biggest news story is Stan survived the week outdoor Edding this week. But anyway, we'll be back next Friday, and all being well, perhaps there might not be quite so much education news to talk about. I suspect that isn't going to happen.
Not happened for the last 18 months.
No, but anyway, let's just keep rolling on. Okay, thank you. See you soon, folks.